The planet Valara was once a shining jewel of the stars. Its white towers reached high above golden deserts, and rivers of silver light ran through its capital city, Vera Prime. The people of Valara, tall, elegant beings with scaled skin that shimmered like gems, had lived in peace for centuries. But now smoke covered their skies. The Threx Dominion, a cruel, warlike race, had burned half their worlds. The Valarian fleet was broken. Their proud empire stood on the edge of collapse. Inside the royal palace, Queen Arya Solan sat alone in the war hall. Her royal robes, once bright silver, now looked dull in the shadow of defeat. Holograms of burning cities floated before her eyes, her people fleeing, soldiers falling, children crying. Every report brought more bad news. Her generals stood around the table, speaking quickly, angrily. "We must surrender, Your Majesty," one said. "No, we can still fight," shouted another. Arya raised her hand and the room fell silent. Her voice was calm but tired. "We have fought for 6 years. Our fleets are gone. Our worlds are ash and dust. If we fight alone, we die alone." She looked at the stars outside the great window. Among them was a small, distant light, a planet called Earth. A young species had risen there, calling themselves humans. They were not part of the Galactic Council. They were new to the stars, few in number, and many still doubted their power. But rumors had spread, rumors of their bravery, of battles they had survived when others would have fallen. Arya whispered, "Perhaps it is time to call for help." From the humans. Days later, a single Terran warship landed on Valara. It was small, gray, and sharp-edged, unlike the elegant ships of the Valarians. From its ramp walked a group of human officers. They looked strange, shorter than Valarians, their skins soft, their eyes bright and filled with purpose. Leading them was Captain Jason Hale of the Terran Federation. He wore a dark uniform, his expression calm and unreadable. When he bowed before the Queen, he spoke with steady confidence. "Your Majesty, I am honored to stand before you. Earth has heard your call for peace." The council chamber buzzed with whispers. Some Valarian nobles hid their smiles, mocking the idea that such a small creature could represent a powerful ally. Queen Arya stood and looked directly at him. "Our two peoples know little of each other, Captain Hale, yet we both face the same enemy. The Threx threaten not just Valara, but every free world." Jason nodded. "Then let us stand together, not as strangers, but as allies." The talks went long into the night. The Valarians wanted immediate military help. The humans asked for a royal alliance, a symbolic union to show all galaxies that peace between species was possible. It was an old human tradition, meant to bind trust through personal sacrifice, and so, to secure her people's future, Queen Arya agreed to a marriage. The ceremony was quiet, held under the silver moons of Valara. Jason Hale stood beside her in a black Terran uniform. Arya wore a flowing gown of shining crystal fabric. The people watched from every screen across the Empire as their queen joined hands with a man from another world. When she looked at him, she expected to see pride or triumph. Instead, she saw calm, almost sorrow. His eyes carried the weight of many wars. After the ceremony, the court celebrated with music and lights. But behind the smiles, whispers grew. "A human king. How ridiculous. He cannot even breathe our air without filters. Is this what our proud empire has come to?" Arya heard it all but said nothing. Jason, however, did not react at all. He stood quietly, watching the stars through the palace window. When she approached him, she asked softly, "Do you always ignore insults so easily?" He smiled faintly. "When you've seen worse, words don't matter much." She tilted her head. "And what have you seen, Captain Hale?" "Worlds fall," he answered simply. 2 weeks after the marriage, the first Threx attack came. Their warships, dark as shadow, entered Valarian space. The frontier colony of Rathar Prime sent a distress signal. Millions of civilians trapped, defenses failing. In the war hall, panic filled the air. Generals argued again. "We must retreat." "No, hold the line." "We can't lose another world." Jason watched them quietly before stepping forward. "Your Majesty," he said, "give me command of a task force. I'll hold Rathar Prime." The room went silent. One general laughed bitterly. "You with what army? A few Terran ships and some courage?" Jason looked at him calmly. "That will do." Queen Arya studied him. "You truly believe you can hold the world?" "I don't believe," Jason replied. "I plan to." Her advisors protested, but Arya's instincts told her this man was different. His calmness was not arrogance, it was experience. After a long pause, she nodded. Very well, Captain Hale. The world of Rathar Prime is yours to defend. May the stars guide you, Jason bowed. They always do. Rathar Prime was already burning when Jason arrived. The Threx army had landed in waves, metallic beasts and insectoid soldiers marching through fire and dust. The Valerian defenders fought bravely but were outnumbered. Jason's small human team deployed from their ship, the Resolute. Their armor was worn, scratched from old wars. Their weapons hummed softly, not glowing with energy like alien tech but designed for deadly precision. The Valerian commander, a tall, silver-scaled warrior named General Cora, met him on the field. You're too late, human. The Threx have taken the southern cities. Jason simply said, then we take them back. He studied the battlefield quickly, marking points on a holographic map. They're pushing too far, too fast. We'll cut their supply lines here and here, then we'll hit their command ship from orbit. Cora blinked. That's suicide. Only if we fail, Jason said. The next hours turned the tide. Jason's team moved with impossible coordination, striking weak points, vanishing into dust, and reappearing behind enemy lines. He commanded drones, artillery strikes, and orbital bombardments with machine-like precision. When the Threx pushed forward, Jason was already there. When they turned back, traps exploded under their feet. He fought beside his soldiers, not behind them. His voice on the comm was calm even as fire fell from the skies. At sunset, the last Threx ship tried to flee the atmosphere. Jason gave the order. The Resolute fired a single pulse beam. White light cut through the clouds and the enemy ship vanished in a storm of fire. Silence followed. The Valerian soldiers stared at the sky. The human team stood in the dust, their armor glowing faintly from heat. General Cora whispered, "By the stars." He did it. When the news reached the palace, the queen dismissed her court and walked alone to her balcony. The stars shimmered above, and she thought of the man she had married for peace. A man who had just saved a world with only a handful of soldiers. Later, Jason returned to Vera Prime. His armor was damaged, his uniform stained, but his eyes were the same, calm, steady. Unreadable, Arya met him in the Grand Hall. For the first time, she smiled softly. "You kept your promise," she said. "I told you," Jason replied quietly. "I don't let them reach your people." That night, when the queen looked at the stars again, she realized something had changed inside her. She had married him for peace, but now, she wanted to understand the human who fought like a legend from old tales. And somewhere deep in her heart, she began to believe that maybe, just maybe, this one human could change the fate of her entire world. The victory at Rathar Prime spread across the galaxy like fire in dry fields. News channels spoke of the impossible, how a small Terran force led by a single human captain had defeated the mighty Threx army. To the Valerians, it was both a miracle and a mystery. Inside the shining halls of Vera Prime, Queen Arya Solon walked through crowds of soldiers cheering her name. But she knew their cheers were not for her. They were for Jason Hale, the human they once mocked. She found him in the lower hangar, standing beside a group of his Terran soldiers. They were repairing their battle armor by hand, talking softly and laughing as if the war outside meant nothing. Jason's face was calm, though a long cut marked his cheek. "You should be resting, Captain," Arya said. He looked up and smiled faintly. "Can't rest while the men work, Your Majesty." She studied him quietly. "You fight differently than my people. You command differently. You even speak differently." Jason nodded. "Humans had to learn fast. Our first wars in space almost ended us. We survived by changing how we think. When you live on a death world, you don't rely on strength, you rely on stubbornness." The word made her tilt her head. "Stubbornness?" He grinned. "It means never giving up, even when logic says you should." Later that day, Queen Arya called a meeting with her generals and Jason's officers. The chamber filled with tension. Some Valerian commanders still refused to trust the human. General Cora spoke first. "Captain Hale, your methods are effective, but they are reckless. You risked your life and the Queen's army on a single plan. That is not strategy, it is madness." Jason replied calmly. "Madness would be letting the enemy crush us because we're afraid to change." The generals muttered angrily. Arya raised her hand. "Enough. The results speak for themselves. Rathar Prime still stands," one old noble bowed stiffly. "Majesty, perhaps. But depending on humans is dangerous. We do not know what they truly want. Arya turned her sharp eyes to him. They want peace, something we all failed to protect. Jason stayed silent. He was not a man who needed to prove himself with words. But Arya noticed his jaw tighten slightly, as if the noble's words had touched a memory he wished to forget. That night, rain fell softly over the capital. The queen stood in the royal garden, her thoughts heavy. She had led her people for years, but never had she felt so unsure of what lay ahead. She heard quiet footsteps behind her. Jason had followed, wearing a simple cloak instead of his armor. "You should not walk alone at night, Your Majesty," he said gently. Arya turned to him, her voice soft but firm. "Do you ever feel alone, Captain Hale?" He paused. "All soldiers do." The garden lights reflected in her silver eyes. "You fight like someone who has already lost everything. Tell me, what happened on your world?" For a long time, Jason said nothing. The rain fell between them like a curtain of memory. Finally, he spoke. "There was a war, long before we met the Valerians or the Threx. It started on one of our moons, Titan. The enemy was not aliens, but humans themselves. We called it the Siege of Titan. It lasted 7 years. His voice grew quiet, distant. Millions died. We fought over land, over power, over things that seem small now. I was there when the cities fell. I saw oceans turn black. When it ended, there was nothing left but ruins and silence." Arya listened, her heart tightening. "And yet your people survived." He nodded slowly. "We learned what it means to lose everything. That's why humans fight the way we do. We don't just fight to win. We fight to never let it happen again." For a moment, the queen saw something deeper than a soldier, something powerful and sad. A man who had carried his world's pain into every battle since. "You carry ghosts," she whispered. Jason looked at her and said, "Yes, but they remind me why I can't fail." Days passed, and Jason began training Valerian troops personally. His methods were strange. He taught them to fight in small groups, to use cover, to rely on quick movement instead of proud open duels. At first, the soldiers struggled. They were used to large, organized formations, not this human way of chaos and speed. But slowly, things changed. The soldiers became sharper, faster, smarter. They learned to think, not just obey. Queen Arya often watched the training from a balcony. Jason would walk among the troops, correcting their aim, teaching them hand signals, even laughing with them when they failed. He treated them as equals, never as lesser beings. Her advisor, Lord Renar, stood beside her one morning and said, "He is changing them, changing us." Arya replied softly, "Maybe that is what we need." Then came a message from the front lines. Another Threx assault was coming. This time the attack was aimed at Ryden, a city that guarded Valara's main shipyards. If Ryden fell, the Empire's fleet would be crippled. In the war hall, maps lit up with red signals. The Threx fleet was massive. Even Jason's expression grew serious. General Cora said grimly, "They're using a new kind of drone, fast, invisible to scanners. Our ships can't track them." Jason looked at the data. "Then we make them visible." The Queen frowned. "How?" Jason smiled slightly. "By forcing them to move where we want." He explained a plan. Create false heat signals to lure the Threx drones into an ambush zone, then strike with combined ground and air fire. It was risky relying on perfect timing and coordination. "Your plan is too dangerous," warned Cora. Jason simply said, "So is doing nothing." The Queen met his eyes across the table. His calmness gave her strength. "We follow Captain Hale's plan," she ordered. The generals obeyed, though some still muttered doubts. The next day, the sky above Ryden turned red with battle. Jason's fleet moved like shadows, each ship following his commands with precision. Valerian pilots executed maneuvers they had never tried before. Swift dives, unpredictable turns. The Threx drones swarmed like angry insects, chasing false heat trails. Then, at the perfect moment, Jason gave the signal. "Now!" From behind the clouds, Terran railguns and Valerian plasma cannons fired together. The sky exploded in white fire. The Threx drones burned like falling stars. Queen Arya watched from her command tower, her heart racing. She had seen wars all her life, but never such control, such perfect unity between different species. Jason's voice came through the comm calmly, even as explosions filled the air. "Target locked. Enemy fleet retreating. Mission complete." The Queen let out a slow breath. He did it again. The Valerian soldiers on the ground cheered. Even the proud generals bowed their heads slightly in respect. The human captain had saved them twice. When Jason returned to the palace, the queen waited for him in the council chamber. He removed his helmet, revealing tired eyes and a faint smile. "You risked your life again," she said. He shrugged lightly. "Comes with the job." Arya stepped closer. "Why do you fight so hard for a world that isn't yours?" Jason looked at her quietly. "Because it's ours now. You called for help and we came. That means your people are my people now." Her heart trembled slightly at his words. She wanted to thank him but found no proper way. So instead she said softly, "You have my trust, Jason Hale, and soon you will have my worlds." He bowed his head. "Then I'll make sure it's a world worth saving." As he left the room, Arya watched him go. She realized she was no longer looking at a stranger from another world, but at the man who might one day be the shield of her empire. And deep inside, she began to wonder what other secrets this quiet, stubborn human still carried behind those calm eyes. The war calmed for a few weeks after the Battle of Ryden. The Valerian people finally had time to breathe. For the first time in years, markets reopened, lights shone in the cities again, and the sound of laughter returned to the streets. But in the royal palace of Vera Prime, Queen Arya Solan could not rest. She stood on her balcony each night watching the city lights, thinking of the human who had brought hope back to her dying empire. Captain Jason Hale, her husband by alliance, was no longer seen as a stranger. His name had become a symbol of courage. Children carried small flags with the Terran emblem beside the Valerian crest. Soldiers whispered that the human commander could see the battlefield like a chessboard, predicting every move of the enemy. Even so, many nobles still distrusted him. They said, "He is clever, but humans fight like chaos. They have no honor." Others warned the queen that relying on Jason was dangerous. Arya listened to their words but felt differently. Every time she saw him command, every time she heard his calm voice in the middle of battle, something stirred in her chest. It wasn't love, at least not yet. It was respect, and something deeper, something she could not name. One bright morning, Queen Arya and Jason rode together in an armored air transport over the rebuilding cities. Below them, thousands of workers repaired homes and factories. The people looked up, cheering as the ship passed. Jason looked down at them with quiet pride. "They're rebuilding faster than I expected," he said. Arya smiled faintly. "My people are strong. They have endured much." Jason nodded. "They remind me of mine." He turned to her, his tone softer. "You gave them hope, Your Majesty. They believe in you." She looked at him and replied, "No, Jason, they believe in us." For a moment there was silence between them, only the hum of the engines. Then the ship shook violently. An explosion flashed outside. The pilot shouted, "Enemy interceptors!" Dozens of Threx fighters dropped from the clouds, firing plasma rounds. Jason moved fast, taking control of the comms. "Evasive maneuvers, now!" The transport twisted through the sky, dodging fire. Jason grabbed a rifle and opened the side hatch. Arya gasped as wind rushed in. "What are you doing?" she cried. "Returning the favor," he said, aiming at a pursuing fighter. He fired a single shot. The human weapon hummed and a white beam pierced the Threx craft, making it explode midair. Within minutes, Terran escort ships arrived and destroyed the rest of the attackers. The skies cleared, but the Queen's hands trembled slightly. She turned to Jason, who calmly closed the hatch and sat down as if nothing had happened. "Do you ever feel fear?" she asked softly. He looked out the window. "Every time. I just don't let it stop me." The Queen stared at him, realizing something. Jason was not fearless. He was human, and that made his courage even more powerful. When they returned to the palace, news arrived from the outer colonies. The Threx were regrouping. This time their leader himself, Grand Marshal Varric, was coming. His fleets were massive, his reputation ruthless. Entire planets had fallen before his name. The council gathered in panic. "We cannot win this war," shouted one noble. "The Threx have endless numbers," another added. "We must ask the Council of Worlds to intervene." But Jason stepped forward, his voice firm. "No one will help you. They fear the Threx more than they respect you. We stand alone." The room fell silent. Queen Arya asked quietly, "Then what do you propose?" Jason looked around the table. "We use what humans call asymmetrical warfare. We can't match them ship for ship. So we fight smart, not strong. He brought up a holographic map. Their fleets rely on centralized command ships. We take out their leaders and the rest will fall apart. We use false signals, surprise strikes, and deception. We make them fight ghosts. The generals frowned. That is not how we fight, one said. Jason answered, That's why you've been losing. Some murmured angrily, but Queen Arya raised her hand. Her voice was calm yet powerful. We will follow Captain Hale's plan. Her decision shocked the council, but none dared argue further. The operation began at dawn. Jason coordinated from a command center deep inside the mountains. Hundreds of ships and troops waited for his word. Signal the Phantom Fleet, Jason ordered. Holographic decoy ships appeared across enemy scanners, confusing the Threx. Their fleets divided, chasing illusions. At the same time, small Valerian strike teams, trained under Jason's command, moved in swift, unpredictable patterns. They ambushed supply lines, cut communication, and vanished before the enemy could strike back. The Threx, known for their brute strength, grew frustrated. They attacked blindly, wasting resources. In the middle of the chaos, Jason led a real assault on their command carrier. He moved through the smoke-filled corridors with his Terran and Valerian soldiers beside him. Every move was precise, every step calculated. When they reached the core chamber, Jason planted an explosive charge. This ends here, he said. Moments later, the command ship erupted in light. Across the system, the Threx fleet fell into confusion. Their chain of command shattered. Back on Velara, Queen Arya watched the enemy fleet scatter on her screens. The impossible had happened again. When Jason returned to the capital, he was covered in dust and smoke. His armor bore new scars, but his eyes remained calm. The Queen met him at the base of the palace steps. Soldiers and citizens cheered all around them. She walked toward him, and for a moment all the noise faded.
You did it again, she said quietly.
He smiled faintly. We did it. Arya studied him, this strange, steady man from another world who had brought her empire back from the edge of ruin. You knew this plan would work? She asked. Jason shook his head. No, I just believed we'd make it work. That answer stayed with her for the rest of the night. Later, during the victory celebration, music filled the palace halls. Valerian nobles, soldiers, and Terran officers danced together for the first time. Arya stood at the top of the grand stairs, watching Jason among the crowd. He did not look like a king. He laughed with soldiers, shook hands, and shared food with engineers. There was no pride, no arrogance, only quiet humanity. Lord Renar approached the Queen. Majesty, he is unlike any warrior we have ever known. Even your enemies speak his name now. Arya nodded. Yes, because he fights not to conquer but to protect. As the music played, Jason looked up toward her. Their eyes met across the room. For a moment, the Queen forgot the war, the pain, and the duty. She saw only the man who had carried her people's hopes with unshakable strength. That night, Arya walked through the palace gardens. The stars above were bright, unbroken by smoke. She found Jason there too, standing beside the fountain, looking at the reflection of the moon. You should be inside celebrating, she said. He smiled faintly. I prefer quiet places, she joined him. You have changed my people, Jason Hale. They no longer see humans as weak or strange. They see them as something greater. He turned toward her. We're not greater, Arya, we're just survivors. That's what humans do best. We survive. His voice carried no pride, only truth, and that truth made her heart stir again. Then perhaps, she said softly, survival is a kind of greatness. They stood together under the stars, two rulers from different worlds bound by more than a treaty. The Queen finally understood that peace was not something given. It was something fought for, with courage and sacrifice, and as she looked at Jason, she realized that the human she had married for peace had become something far more important. He was no longer just her husband. He was the heart of her world's hope. The sky above the capital burned red. Fire and smoke rose from the distant plains as the armies of the Northern Coalition closed in. The alien world of Valoria trembled. Its queen, Serathia, stood on the highest balcony of her palace, watching her people flee through the city gates. The sound of drums and horns filled the wind. Her world was falling apart. The council had warned her not to marry a human, calling it foolish, saying he was too unpredictable, too dangerous. But she had seen something in him. something the galaxy could never understand. Now that man, the human named Marcus Hale, stood at the edge of the battlefield facing thousands alone. The palace guards watched him through their scopes. None spoke. None dared to move, Your Majesty, General Care said softly beside her. The human. He refuses to retreat. He told us to pull all forces back into the capital. Sarathia turned to him sharply. And you obeyed? Care swallowed hard. He said we would only get in the way. He claims he can stop them alone. The Queen's voice broke slightly. Alone against that army? Care nodded grimly. Yes, my Queen, and... He smiled when he said it. Far beyond the walls, Marcus stood in the tall grass as the alien sun set behind him. His armor was scratched and scorched from the earlier battles, his weapon holstered at his hip. He carried no shield, no energy field, only a strange device strapped to his wrist, a mix of human and alien technology he had rebuilt himself. Before him stretched the Northern Coalition, hundreds of armored vehicles, thousands of alien soldiers all roaring and chanting for his death. One of the enemy warlords stepped forward, his tall form shining under the light, his scaled face twisted into a cruel smile. Human, he shouted across the field. Your queen hides behind her walls and you stand here alone? You think your flesh can stop metal and fire? Marcus tilted his head slightly, his expression calm. You shouldn't have come this far. The warlord laughed. And why not? Marcus looked at the horizon, his voice cold. Because this is where your army dies. The enemy gave the order to charge, engines roared. Cannons fired. Explosions filled the plains. The alien army advanced like a storm. Marcus raised his wrist device, pressed a single button, and the earth answered him. A deep rumble rolled through the ground as hidden structures unfolded from beneath the soil. Dark, angular drones that rose like iron ghosts. The devices were ancient human combat constructs, repurposed by Marcus during the peace years. He had spent months secretly repairing them, preparing for this day. Dozens became hundreds. The machines spread out behind him, hovering silently. Each one carried weapons powered by fusion cores and plasma generators. Old Earth technology feared throughout the galaxy. The alien army slowed. Confused, Marcus whispered to himself, for peace. Then he gave the command. The drones opened fire. Light consumed the field. From the city walls, Sarathia and her generals watched in disbelief. It wasn't a battle. It was a storm of light and thunder. Entire armored columns melted under the white beams. The sound shook the earth so violently that even the palace trembled. The sky turned blue-white as energy discharges ripped through the clouds. The Queen clutched the railing, her golden eyes wide. What is that power? General Care stared through his scope. Those machines, they carry the mark of old Earth. Those are human war constructs. Sarathia turned to him sharply. Old Earth? You mean the weapons your historians swore were destroyed? Care nodded slowly. Yes, Majesty. They say humans buried them when they swore never to wage war again, but it seems your human never forgot how. On the field, Marcus moved through smoke and fire, his armor reflecting bursts of plasma. The enemy's guns locked on him, but each shot missed or struck with no effect. His armor adapted faster than their weapons could calculate. He moved like a shadow, calm and precise. Every time he raised his hand, drones adjusted their aim. Every time he whispered into his comm, the machines obeyed. The warlord roared and charged at him with a plasma blade. Marcus met him halfway, caught the blade barehanded, and crushed it. The warlord's eyes widened in disbelief before a pulse blast sent him flying back into his own troops. Your war ends here, Marcus said quietly. The remaining soldiers began to break. Their courage shattered as the drones advanced in perfect formation. The battlefield was no longer theirs. It belonged to the human. Hours later, silence fell. Only the wind moved over the scorched land. The enemy army was gone, either destroyed or in full retreat. Marcus stood alone among the ruins. His armor was cracked, his body tired, but his eyes were steady. He deactivated the drones, letting them sink back into the ground like sleeping giants. When the dust settled, he turned toward the capital. He could already see the Queen's banners waving from the walls. Sarathia rushed to the city gates, her royal guards struggling to keep up. She didn't care for titles or protocol now. She only wanted to see him. When Marcus finally appeared through the smoke, the people cheered. the streets filled with shouts of the human lives and the Queen's protector. Sarathia stepped forward. Her heart pounded. "You fought alone," she said softly as he approached. Marcus gave a tired smile. "Not alone. I had your people to fight for. That was enough." She looked at him, her eyes full of emotion. "You destroyed an army by yourself. Why didn't you tell me about those machines?" He shrugged lightly. "Because peace doesn't last without strength. I hoped we'd never need them." The Queen lowered her head. "And if you had fallen?" Marcus looked at the horizon. Then at least they'd know humanity stood with Valoria till the end. That night the capital held no celebrations. There was only silence, a heavy, respectful silence that spread across every home and every street. The people of Valoria had seen something they didn't understand. A single man had fought against the impossible and won. The stories spread like wildfire, and even the distant systems began to whisper of the human king of war. In the palace, Sarathia sat beside Marcus as healers treated his wounds. "You should rest," she told him softly. "I will," he replied, staring at the stars. "But this war isn't done yet. The coalition will come again, stronger." The Queen frowned. "Then what can stop them next time?" Marcus closed his eyes for a moment, then whispered, "The same thing that stopped them today, determination." Sarathia looked at him, her heart torn between fear and admiration. She realized then that her husband was not just a man. He was something far more dangerous and far more noble. He was human. The galaxy watched as the Threx Dominion prepared their final assault. Their fleets had regrouped, more massive and terrifying than ever. Entire sectors of stars trembled as millions of soldiers marched toward Valara, and their ultimate weapon, a colossal war beast, led the charge. This was no ordinary attack. It was a declaration of total annihilation. Inside the palace of Vera Prime, Queen Arya Solon stood before the command table, flanked by generals and Terran officers. Her golden eyes traced the holographic map showing the advancing enemy. Jason Hale, her human husband and the commander of their defense, stood beside her. His black armor, scorched from earlier battles, reflected the flickering lights of the command room. He didn't show fear or worry, only calm focus. "The Threx have brought their superweapon," Jason said quietly. "If it reaches the planet, every city, every life will be gone." General Kerr groaned. "Even your drones cannot stop it." "It's the size of a city," Jason nodded. "Which is why we won't try to stop it in the open. We go inside." Arya's voice trembled slightly. "You mean, you'll lead a strike team into the heart of that monster?" Jason looked at her steadily. "If we don't, there will be no Valara left. If we succeed, the galaxy may finally understand what humans can do." She swallowed. "And if you fail?" "I will not fail," he said simply. The strike team assembled aboard the Resolute, the Terran command ship. The Valerian soldiers looked uneasy. Few had ever seen a human willing to face certain death. Yet here he was, calm and commanding. As the ship approached the Threx war beast, the enormity of the machine became clear. It moved like a living fortress, its armored limbs crushing entire villages. Cannons mounted along its back fired without pause, reducing forests and fields to ash. Jason gave his team a final instruction. "We move quickly. Hit the core and plant the fusion charges. No hesitation. Cover each other." The ship docked on the creature's surface, its hull groaning under pressure. Marcus led the team into the darkness of the living war machine. Inside, alien machines hissed and sparked, patrolling the corridors. "Every step was a calculated risk. We stick together," Jason said, eyes sharp. "We've only one chance." The team advanced through narrow corridors, avoiding traps and automated defenses. The hum of the creature's internal systems was deafening. Jason's voice remained calm over comms, guiding his team through each passage, each junction. Finally, they reached the core chamber. The Threx superweapon's heart pulsed with energy like a beating sun. It radiated power so immense that it could annihilate cities in a single moment. Jason examined the chamber. "This is it. Plant the charges." As the team worked, alarms blared. Alien soldiers discovered their intrusion. A fierce battle erupted. Valerian soldiers and Terran troops fought side by side, their movements perfectly coordinated. Jason moved with unmatched precision. Every shot he fired, every order he gave turned the tide. He dodged attacks that would have killed a lesser human, countering with skill and speed that astonished the Valerian warriors. The fusion charges were set. Jason signaled the retreat. "Move out, now!" The corridors shook violently. The Threx war beast sensed the intrusion and roared, firing internal defenses at them. The team ran, narrowly avoiding collapsing walls and flaming machinery. When they reached the docking bay, the ship rose into orbit just as the creature erupted in a brilliant explosion. White and gold light consumed the battlefield. The war beast's death shook the planet, and debris rained down over the mountains. From the palace, Queen Arya watched in awe. She saw the massive explosion through the view screens and felt her chest tighten. The impossible had happened. Marcus Hale had done it. He had destroyed the Threx superweapon. The Threx fleet, leaderless and disoriented, began to retreat in chaos. Without their ultimate weapon, their soldiers surrendered or fled to the outer systems. Valara was safe. Arya's generals looked stunned, and even the most skeptical nobles bowed in respect. The humans had changed the course of the war. Queen Arya herself ran through the palace gates toward the battlefield, ignoring guards and warnings. She had to see him. When she arrived, Jason was standing amidst the ruins, his black armor scorched, his uniform torn, but his eyes calm and bright. Soldiers cheered as he waved, but he only looked toward her. "You did it," she said, breathless. "We did it," he corrected. Arya studied him. "I don't think the galaxy has ever seen anyone like you." Jason gave a small smile. "It won't forget us now." In the days that followed, Valara began to rebuild. Cities rose from ash, and people celebrated their survival. Statues of the human captain appeared in plazas alongside the queen who had trusted him. Yet, Jason refused personal glory. He worked among the soldiers, the engineers, and the civilians. He fixed machines, helped rebuild homes, and trained Valerian troops in human strategies. The queen watched him from the palace balcony, her admiration growing. She realized that she had married him for peace, but the man had given them much more: hope, strength, and courage that no alien army could ever destroy. Finally, during a quiet evening, the queen and Jason stood together in the palace gardens. The stars above shone brightly, unbroken by smoke or war. "You changed everything," Arya said softly. Jason looked at her, tired but smiling. "We changed everything. Not just Valara, but the galaxy. Humans are not small or weak. We fight because we must, and we protect because we care." Arya's hand brushed against his. "I thought I married you for peace," she admitted. "But now I see you were the shield my people needed." Jason's voice was low, almost a whisper. "And you, Arya, were the heart that guided them. Without you, none of this matters." The queen looked at him, her eyes soft. "Do you think the galaxy will ever understand humans?" He shrugged. "Maybe not. But they will remember. They will tell stories of the human who stood alone and faced impossible odds. And maybe one day they will understand that courage is not measured in size or strength, but in heart." The human captain and the Valerian queen walked together through the gardens, side by side. The city glowed behind them, and the people cheered from the streets. Across the stars, other civilizations watched in awe. In distant systems, historians would record the battle for generations. Poets would write of the human who destroyed armies by himself, and of the queen who trusted him. And somewhere in the whispers of the galaxy, a legend was born: the human king, the man who changed the stars. Queen Arya finally understood that she had married not just a man for peace, but a hero, a protector, and a symbol of hope. Humanity, once underestimated, had proven its power and courage. Marcus Hale looked at the horizon and said quietly, "This war is over. But peace, that is something we must keep building every day." Arya smiled. "And we will build it together." As the two stood under the stars, the people of Valara celebrated not just survival, but the beginning of a new era, a future shaped by courage, unity, and the heart of a human who refused to give up. For across the galaxy, the name human would no longer be whispered as a curiosity. It would be spoken with respect, awe, and hope. And somewhere deep in the stars, Marcus Hale and Queen Arya Solan knew one thing. Together, they had not only saved a world but inspired a galaxy.